And I just learned, fortunately, very early on that my ideas matter and they're valuable. And if I don't speak up, things go the wrong way all the time. If we don't use our voice, right? We don't say, hey, whether it's right or wrong, learn to use your voice and learn to speak up, learn to be confident in that. And I think that's critical skill.
We're rolling. Thanks for being here, Trina.
You're so welcome. Glad to be here.
I am really excited to have this conversation. When I heard your story at tacos together, I was like, that was incredible.
Thank you.
And I think in anything that has to do with like empowering, especially like single moms and women to like break out into tech and to do things that they've never done before is like, that's pretty inspiring. And then your pedigree is amazing. But I normally start off with like a great question, but I feel like people kind of need to, I feel like a great start would be like your background and like where you came from and how you got here.
Yeah. Let me do the 50 years in 2 minutes. Is that what we need to do?
Yeah, there you go.
So I am a Utah girl. I've been born and raised here, kind of all over the place. I've moved a lot, 10 times up until I was 15, and mainly in Utah County, up in Cache Valley, Logan area. So we moved around a lot, but I had a family of 9 brothers and sisters. There was 10 of us total. And so it was a little bit chaotic of an upbringing, but I didn't realize it, growing up, it was just like, oh, that's just what you do. You come home and moving van there, go load everything up and we go again. And so we did that. But my parents were awesome in creating environments where I was just out in the mountains all the time, very adventurous, go build a hut and go do this, go, explore a mine, which probably wasn't the safest thing to be doing, but I just built this, I guess is kind of just like, I just went and did stuff. And I kind of get asked a lot, like, how do you, move into your career? How did you do all of this? And I guess I just was raised with just a risk-taking approach to things, where I didn't really think much, which got me into trouble, but also, propelled me in my career. It's kind of like a give and take. You get both sides of those things, right? So, as I got into high school, I really loved architectural engineering. My dad had been a builder, he owned a welding shop, right?
Cool. Yeah.
So that's kind of the background there. But as I started into architectural design, I realized that I took a Pascal programming class there and realized that computer science might be a much better fit for me. And I didn't think twice about it. I get asked a lot because there's a lot of like, well, how did you get in? How did you stay in? But it was just like, no, I knew this was where I needed to go. I never second guessed it. And so I switched my degree into computer science, and the rest is history. Long career, 30 years in tech for Novell, eBay, Oracle, and then launched my consulting firm. And then part of the work that I had done throughout my whole career, it's like lots of education, done computer science, bachelor's in business and information systems, really got into looking at business strategy and went back to Harvard and did strategy there. And just the importance of an education, because growing up, we didn't have financial means. So I had to find my way in somehow, and really knew that education was the way that I could, build my way out of that. So a lot of years of just getting educated, kind of building my career, moving forward, but then also this thing called sexism, which happened, and started to realize this is a real challenge, for anyone that's in the industry. It's not easy for women. And so I started to just dig in. I actually wrote my thesis paper when I did my computer science degree on why women should go into computer science. So this has been like a lifelong journey for me of getting more women in, because they're great. We say at Tech Moms, tech jobs, tech jobs are mom jobs.
Yeah.
Right. And they're great for moms. They're flexible and potentially remote working and higher pay, but yet we don't move women into these roles. So that's kind of my mission right now with Tech Moms. We launched that program about 3 years ago. And where that came from is I was the global president of women in IT at eBay. I oversaw programs for 1,500 members in 17 countries, and was running programs to help, women in leadership and women in technology. And one of the things that we did was coding camps for employees' daughters.
Oh, cool.
And it was really cool. And people got a lot more involved. And what I found was it was a great way for us to get men involved. Because just like we were talking before we got launched here, is like you start to connect when it's somebody you care about.
Right.
Somehow with a colleague, it doesn't matter as much. But when you start saying your daughter's going to go deal with this stuff, you get involved.
Yeah.
Right. And so I started seeing this shift happening where we were getting a lot more support and enabling and becoming more aware without me having to go out and say, you need to talk about this. Right. It was like they were coming to me and saying, how do we do this? How do we fix this? What do we need to do? What can I do? Right. What actions can I take? And then they also were asking, well, what about my wife?
Oh, yeah.
I think she would be great in tech. How does she get in? Right. Yeah. And then I would actually have women literally knock on my front door and say, Trina, I want to go back to work. A lot of women, it's like, I want to go back to work. I just don't know how to start. I don't know where to go. I don't know how to do this. And so I started to put together programs for it, got connected to my co-founder, Mikkel Blake. She was living in San Francisco at the time. And she and I just started saying, we've got a shared passion here. Let's get things going. And that was in 2019, 2020.
Wow.
Yeah. Right. Pre-COVID. We launched in the middle of COVID.
Right there.
It was crazy.
Holy cow.
But yeah. And then my third co-founder, Robin Scribner, came in. We met at a few times and she's like, yeah, I'm ready to go. And we got launched and now we've run over 22 cohorts and over 400 women have gone through the program. Yeah. So amazing growth.
There's so many things to unpack in like your history and like what you just kind of touched on there. The first one though, the question that came to my mind right off the bat was because you introduced Tech Mom. So that's kind of the background everybody would need to know. Everybody
knows. Yeah. They don't know all the other stuff.
Yeah. Right. But you mentioned that you kind of grew up, very like risk adverse in a sense, right? Like you just kind of love to take it.
Go figure it out.
Yeah. How do you give that to other moms? Cause that's like, I feel like, I'm the same way. And like, if you're an entrepreneur, you kind of are, you're like, you're just like, hey, the question isn't what if it doesn't work? The question is, what if it does work?
What if it does work? That fear of starting. I still fight it some, it's not like even in my companies, I'm like, oh, I could launch this, but what if it goes bad? You have those thoughts. And then I go, what if it goes great? What if this thing takes off? What if you never start? I'm like, I'll never know if it failed or not. What do they say? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Don't take. Yeah. That's yeah.
So I just have taken a lot of shots and I've failed a lot. I've failed so many times. Right. But every time I've learned something. So I did real estate for a number of years while I was going through my career. Like I always have like these side projects. I can't stop, I guess, but I just, I'm a goer. But I did real estate and I was like, I'm going to, get into real estate. I loved it. I love the real estate area until the 2008 recession hits. And then you're like, yeah, this isn't so great.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not so into this anymore. And been going through a divorce at the same time. I'm like, okay, something's got to give.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I've been working on when asking what I tell people, I've been writing a book. It's called Balance is Goat Shit. The reason goat shit instead of bullshit is growing up, we had goats. So I tell a lot of goat stories and so kind of play on words there, but really it's about putting our life first and orchestrate life work harmony instead of work-life balance. It's put your life first, then you have work and then you find harmony. And how do you orchestrate across all the areas of your life? So one of the things that's been one of the largest challenges for the students that we're working with is they are trying to make this transition, but they haven't learned that they've got to give certain things up and prioritize and set a vision for yourself. And so I came up with a model that I'd been teaching to my students that I'm like, we need to just put this out there. So they go through, I can hand them the book. I'm like, here you go. Right. You don't have to wait for me to come tell you this. But really, if you were to just kind of take your life and look at it like a garden, right? Like, what are we going to bloom and what are we going to grow and what are the things we're going to invest in? Because everybody has the same amount of time. Nobody gets like, that's the one even playing field. We all have the same amount of time, right? So how are we going to use it and what are we going to choose to use it on?
Yeah.
You need to be very intentional on that. And so I divide the garden. Like if you were to take a piece of paper and just draw a big X, right, across your paper. One area, it's into 4. You've got relationships. What relationships are we going to build? Where are we going to focus? Do we have relationships that are toxic? And we got to keep them out. I call those the goats because goats consume and gardeners bloom, right? So who are the goats you're going to keep out of your garden? And then what gardeners are you going to bring in to help you bloom?
Very, very cool symbol, by the way, because goats are usually symbolized as
like you don't want to be the greatest of all time. Just keep those ones out. They're usually troublemakers.
I love like myths and symbolism, like like old Joseph Campbell, or like the Bible.
Oh yeah.
Goats are always
hero's journey.
Yeah. Goats are always the ones you get rid of.
Keep those out. They'll trample your garden. We had goats growing up, and one of them was named Casper, the unfriendly goat. And I have lots of stories about goats. Cool. Yeah, milk goat wars. That was another fun thing. My brothers and sisters and I would, instead of water guns, you'd pick up a goat and squirt each other. Have fun with that.
That's amazing.
Right? Yeah.
Okay, so you have relationships.
Relationships. Yep. And then you have your finances. One of the things that we see a lot are we neglect our finances. And as for women especially, I'm not sure why we're socialized or raised to not care for our financial needs or focus on those or understand how to build wealth or how to invest in the stock market or how to run a business, like some of these kind of core financial, like developing in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And then with your work and career and community, that needs to be a set of focus. What am I really going to grow in my career and lean into it? A lot of times I'll have, I'm a stay-at-home mom and I'm not going to have a career. That's great. There's not a right or wrong, right? There's no, if you work or if you don't, there's not a good or bad. But being involved and working in some way, whether it's a community involvement or you're going to be a lot more fulfilled and have a lot more fulfillment in your life and find harmony by doing that. And so not shying away and saying, no, I don't need to, but you should. Just because there's a psychological benefit, right, in investing and growing and working and putting yourself to use.
Yeah.
And then the last one is your personal development. So what are my hobbies? What am I building from a knowledge? What about my fitness? Do we prioritize that? There's been a few of my students I've talked to and they're like, yeah, I don't have hobbies. And I'm like, well, how do you know who you are? Or what you
want to do? Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the 4 areas. But what I do is you have to start all of that with the fertile soil of mental health and wellness, right? Because nothing's going to grow if you haven't taken care of yourself, like making sure you're in a place where you can find the energy and time to grow all of these areas.
Right. And
then the other 2 kind of analogies is like setting your fence lines to keep out the goats, right? Mm-hmm. And then pulling the weeds. So you have all these weeds of fear and doubt and shame and guilt and all this stuff growing and popping up all the time. And you have to tend to those things. And I call it pluck and chuck, right? Or flip it. Yeah. It's like, just get rid of, like recognizing them and being able to work through getting rid of those things.
Yeah.
So it's a long answer, very long answer to your question, but it's not a simple, here's what you do and you move forward. It all starts though, finding your purpose and vision in life.
Yeah.
Like you can't figure out what to plant if you don't know where you're going.
Yeah. And I used to, like, I've interviewed quite a few people about this, finding your purpose or all these things. And for a long time, I was guilty of like, man, that is just all like crazy. Right. Cause like I was born, so I'm Polynesian and my grandpa, like whenever he would hear that phrase, like work smarter, not harder, he'd be like, damn it, just work. Right.
Yeah,
and so
like get it done.
Yeah. And so we just like, that's what I was like, I don't really know. Like, I know that I need to do this, to get here. So like, that's it, right? That's all I need. And then I kind of evolved to like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense, because when you have your values aligned, that's how you guide your decision making.
Exactly. How do you know what you're going to say yes to and no to? You don't.
Right.
If it makes, it's really interesting as I've worked with a few women now that have gone through this. They're like, I know what to say yes to. I know what to say. It doesn't become like just go whatever everybody tells me to go. It's like, no, I have intentionality in what I'm deciding to do, and I'm going forward with purpose. Like, this is what I want to do. Those conversations with your spouse or with friends or with family or whoever else, it gets a lot easier. Even your boss, right?
Yeah.
Like, okay, what am I working towards? All right, I know what to say yes to, instead of doing all just stuff. Right.
And you're more confident in your yeses.
Absolutely.
And your no's, right.
Yeah. It definitely increases confidence.
Yeah. And that's what I like. I think when you have a lot of confidence, everything sounds clearer. Right. And like nobody quit. Cause I love sales training. Like that's what I sales and marketing. I was a sales trainer for a long time. I still do that every now and then. But, what I noticed and what I learned was like in our brains, like people don't know the difference between no confidence and trying to scam you. Yeah. Right. Like if you've ever so I started in the car world. Right. And if you saw, and if a new car salesman came up and he was stuttering, he was like, no, I didn't. You don't, he's not answering your questions. He's dodging you. Like, you don't know that you don't know if he's new or if he's trying to, and so your brain just goes away. And so like, I'm like, you got to like say things with confidence. Right. Yep. And if you deliver it right, like you'll be there. Right. You know? And so that makes a big difference. And so when people believe you, like when you know where you're coming from and you know what you're saying and you believe it, you're like, that's it. It's really hard to argue with someone's conviction and confidence.
Oh, absolutely. I did technical sales at Oracle. I was a senior consultant there. And one of the biggest things that I did is I became a trusted advisor, right? It's like I could go in and sell more than anybody else just because I was confident in what I was doing, and I was there to solve their problems, and I just built trust. And I think that's the same thing that I've been doing as I've built, my business and Tech Moms, is comes from a place of trust, usually when I'm working with individuals. And I think that comes through quite often. It's like, we're going to do this. Okay. We got it.
Well, you just have a lot of, I think, confidence. I think confidence comes from two things. I think it comes from empathy, which I think you have a lot of, right? Obviously. And then like confidence, right? You're just like, this is it, right? Like I'm here to help you. And then
we'll figure it out together. Let's go.
Because a lot of people kind of they also need to be guide. Like you also just need to guide things. And so I like how you mentioned those 4 areas. They're just like, those are your guides while you go through. And I really found a lot in that. And so obviously one of the reasons I also wanted to talk to you was because, like I mentioned before, right? I'm a girl dad. So break it down. Like I've got a lot to learn and a lot to get ready for. Yeah. I mean, I guess first is like, we kind of understand. I mean, I guess maybe some people don't because it's still happening. Right. But like for me, I understand like you have to, there are things that I don't experience because of, like I'm a guy and so like, how do you, where do you start?
Where do you start?
Yeah. I don't even know.
So, a couple of things is I first want to say thank you, because leaning into it and saying, I want to learn, I want to understand this more. That's the place where we have to start from. In a lot of the corporate consulting that I do, people shy away. It's like an immediate barrier, like, oh no, I'm going to be personally attacked. Right. And you got to get over that, right? Like, what do they say in leadership? It's you got to get uncomfortable. But not in this area. That's just too uncomfortable, right? Like, no.
Right.
But you do you're going to get uncomfortable because you're going to start recognizing maybe even things in yourself that, and I've had to do this, like with race and ethnicity and some of the things that I recognized, my own biases, we all have them, and it's okay. Right. Like we got to get to there. Let's start from, it's okay.
Like, right. I know where I'm at. It was just like, I love this also, this kind of thread, by the way, not to interrupt or anything, but like what makes you successful in one area makes you successful in another.
Yeah.
So just like you were talking about in business, like you got to be like, all right, this is the slate I'm working with.
Yeah.
Now let's move.
Let's just move forward. Let's start where you're at.
Yeah.
Right. And we don't need to, everybody's going to be a different place. Every company I work with is at a different place. They're all coming from a different level of understanding, and that's fine. We start where you're at. And the only thing is, let's start going, right? Mm-hmm. Let's start understanding. And then there's a couple of things that I use when I do training. So one is leadership training. I've launched empathy training. Mm-hmm. And emotional intelligence. And if it comes down to it, I would just say it's starting with emotional intelligence and being able to understand your own ability to not react emotionally mm-hmm. and think logically. Because, emotions hit your limbic system first. You're first emotional and then logical. Mm-hmm. So you kind of like get emotional first and then think later. Yeah. And so you've got to kind of interrupt that. And that's where a lot of these challenges from bias and racism and sexism all kind of come from that level. So going through the emotional intelligence side of it and then understanding true empathy and understanding somebody else's position, that's a life experience you'll never have to endure, fortunately for many, but many are. And so getting to understand then I go into terminology of all of the different forms of sexism. We use one word to describe, there's 8 different forms. And Dr. Madsen here in Utah has done a great study. In fact, my co-founder was the lead researcher on responding to sexism. And so I've used a lot of that research as a foundation to go just talk about the different forms of sexism that can happen, whether it's not just like objectification or some of those, but there's very subtle things that happen within the workplace, like stereotypes, like you're supposed to be at home. I've had things where I was told twice in my career, Trina, you didn't get that job because the other gentleman has a family he needs to provide for, so we're going to promote him. Like twice. And then I've had some of my tech moms recently been told that as well. So it's still happening. Like companies. Last year, companies still to this day are telling employees, and they don't know that they can speak up. I don't think they understand there's discrimination laws now,
mm-hmm. Yeah, you can't do that.
You can't do that. But it's still happening. I mean, there's just a lot to unpack there. We don't probably have enough time to go through my whole training, but there's just even leaning in and reading some of those research briefs are great to go, wow, I didn't think about that,
Yeah. And but I like how you start with empathy, because I think that's a big place. Because like for me, I had no clue that like 8 forms and like that's all crazy. But I think what kind of helped me was obviously having my daughter and then realizing like holy shit, people don't experience what I do, right? Mm-hmm. Or like whatever. And I think you made a good point about people just getting personal. Because like I used to do that. I used to be like, well, who decides which heart is worse? Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the reality is like, that's not the question you should be asking, right? Yeah. Like it should just be like, no, we need to help build people and like realize that everybody's heart is hard. And we just, I don't know, I feel like we can all make each other's burdens lighter.
Absolutely.
However we can.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it just starts with conversation and awareness, right? I think a mindset of curiosity is the key. Yeah.
What do you, what's like the number one piece of advice if you, in a podcast setting like this, or you're just passing by, like, what's that one thing that you give to men that's like, here's, if you only have to do one thing. I mean, obviously there's a lot, right?
There is a lot.
And there's a start, but
that's a hard question.
But if you're like, look, like, is it listen more? Is it like, don't speak when, you're like everybody interrupts, or what?
Everybody to be involved. I would never shut anybody down for speaking, but I think the awareness piece of looking around and saying, okay, are there any women in this room that I'm working with? And why is that? Why does everybody look like me? Right. Mm. And it could be gender or race or, just why do we not have that? And ask the question. The whole reason I started Tech Moms and started doing some of this work is because at eBay I was a senior director over the technology operations team, and I was, working to hire diversity, and I couldn't find it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept getting told, well, women just don't go in IT. And I'm like, that's not an okay answer. Well, why is that? Right? Why we each can then go do something about it. And that's what I did. I said, well, that's not okay. Let's go do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think everybody has the opportunity to create change from where they're at, just being aware and recognizing it exists and then being part of the solution.
Yeah. And then working to find solutions.
Yeah. Find ways to find the solutions because they do exist. They do want to get in, whatever. It's just why we put up barriers for individuals to be able to access the same opportunities.
Yeah. I heard, some crazy stats, but I remember one time I got checked on a podcast and it was awesome. Sid Tetro.
Mm-hmm.
I was interviewing her and I'd done a little research and I came across a news article. Sid Tetro article was like Wall Street Journal, Sidney Tetro, largest round raised by a female CEO. And I was like, how do you feel about that? Do you want CEO to be in there? Why couldn't it just be CEO? And she was like, no, it had to be female. Because people needed, or woman, like people needed to know that a woman could do that.
Yeah.
And I was like, damn.
She's inspired thousands, right?
Good point.
Myself included.
Yeah.
So I've been participating with the Tech Council for years. Yeah. It's incredible. And
that story was so powerful for me because I tell other guys now, I'm like, dude, like I made a mistake. And but I didn't get ripped for it. I got checked and like I learned from it and it was like, fine, man.
That's
great.
That's what you have to do.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I talk about, so kind of my wrap up chapter in my book, as I was writing, it's been a really incredible experience for me as I'm writing all of these different stories that I had forms of sexism would come out and it'd just come out and it'd be like, whoa, what do I do with this? I'm trying to write this story, but it's just going to distract from what I'm trying to say. So I kind of took it and I set it to the side and I'm like, okay, not now. I'm just going to take that little story and deal with it later. Right? I've got to get this thing done. So at the end of my book, I talk about, I call it pest control. And it's knowing that you're getting it's like, if you look at as a woman or a person of color, you're just getting little stings all the time. It's like bugs that are just coming at you and you get stung here and it's like, okay. And then you get again and then again and again, and it just adds up. And then you start going, okay, I'm dealing with all of these things I don't know how to quite. And it just kept coming out as I was writing. And so I talk about pest control. The number one way to handle some of this is to have a voice. No more building a thicker skin. I think a lot of women have been told, just build a thicker skin, just get through it, just kind of deal with it. And I think we've got to start speaking up, just like she did with you, and say, well, here's actually what needs to be done or how you could respond, and being open to hearing that. Right. And then it starts to change. But until we get a voice, it's just going to stay how it is.
Right.
So,
and this is a question that I like to dig into because it's something that I'm battling personally as a girl dad.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm coming from with this question.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a hard one because, I want my daughter. So like my daughter's in jujitsu. She like I do a lot of things like that. And then she's in dance. She likes a lot of things. Yeah. But the question is like, we want to fix this. And the goal is to like get as many people on board as we can.
Yeah.
But at some point, I'm battling as a dad. Like at some point, I have to teach my daughter like a little bit of resiliency. Like, hey, this is going to happen, and
it's going to happen.
And we're like, and so like, where how do you balance this line of like, we've got to change the world, and like these things are real. To like, even though these things are real and these things are happening, I've got to like move, and we got to
keep going. And I think. Let's acknowledge it's real. Yeah. Right. Let's stop saying, oh, it doesn't happen anymore. It does. Okay. So that's the first step.
I agree.
Because I hear that even when I go in to do corporate consulting, they're like, yeah, this just isn't a thing anymore. I'm like, yeah, it is. Right. It is.
That's crazy.
So, with your daughters, just talking about like, this is something you're going to need to deal with. And here's how to recognize it and how to have a voice. And I would say not just our daughters. I think our sons need to be aware of this. Like we need to be treating our sons like, I don't want you to be raised this way. You need to be able to understand the different forms of sexism that might be there So I think I shared this story when I spoke, but my 15-year-old son came to me. And he's like, hey, Mom, if you keep giving all the jobs to women, there won't be enough for men. And
that's
this is
crazy.
my son that I raised and paid for and fed and done everything for. And he was saying you shouldn't give the jobs to women, and so it's just socialized somehow into us.
Yeah. Like you're like, where did you even
hear that?
Yeah.
And then a couple years later, like it was great because it allowed me to have a really wonderful conversation about, like, you understand that's biased. Do you understand? Like, because he's like mortified, and he does have that reaction, but he's like, oh, okay, we can talk through that thing. We can look at some of those things. And then a couple years later, I get a call from the principal's office and they said, we've got your son in here. And I'm like, oh crap.
Yeah.
But what he had done is he had identified that there were some boys at school sexting some of the girls, and he went and reported it. And so he had the confidence to be able to step up on somebody else's behalf and recognize it and say, that's not okay. I'm going to do something about it.
Wow.
And I think having those conversations need to happen. Don't just, prep your girls for war, right?
Yeah, right.
Like, they need to be prepared, but also our sons need to be raised differently.
Yeah. I have a boy and a girl.
Yeah. So it's needed conversations on both sides in order to really affect long-term change here.
And I like that because it's always a good conversation of, like, I think it starts with that, like, also abundance mindset. Like, what are you talking about, man? There's so many jobs.
And by the way, fill the jobs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And by the way, you always have the opportunity to start your own thing. Like, there's so many things. And so I just like the whole team. I like coming at it from a team perspective of, like, dude, it's so good to have different members on your team, right? Like, you know what I mean? I grew up, like, football and wrestling. I'm from Iowa, so like football and wrestling.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know, I kind of compare it to, like, body types, like, right? Like, just because you're bigger doesn't mean you can't play football, right? Like, we need big guys, we need small guys, we need fast guys, we need slow, whatever, right? And none of it makes anybody better. We just need team members, like, to fill the roles. And,
absolutely.
And that's a loose generalization, I realize, like, but it's a good place to, like, teach my girls, like, and my son.
And that they're, the biggest thing I would say is they need to understand their value. Their value that they're contributing. And I talk to our students a lot about this, is that we need your minds. We need your ideas. We need all of those things. For me, this really came out early on when I was doing my computer science degree and we were assigned in a group. And of course, I'm the only woman in my classes. And we're doing this project, and I got really shy. Believe it or not, I was shy. And they're doing this project and I'm just kind of watching and I'm like, they're doing it really complicated. I'm like, why are you doing it that way? I'm just having this whole inner dialogue. And I stop and I say, hey, what if we were to do it this way? And they're like, oh yeah, that would be a lot simpler. We could do that. Like, and I just learned, fortunately, very early on that my ideas matter and they're valuable. And if I don't speak up, things go the wrong way all the time. If we don't use our voice, right? We don't say, hey, whether it's right or wrong, learn to use your voice and learn to speak up, learn to be confident in that. And I think that's critical skill. Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where you want it to be gone. Cause, like, I'm like, dang, man, that's kind of crazy. And I don't want either one, right? Like, my girl or my boy to be something, to be crazy. And so I like having these conversations because they are just so important. Like, I've experienced it too. Like, even in sales, because in sales, because you've been there, right?
Yeah.
The argument really quickly is like, well, we're all on commission. It's all, and I'm like, well, that's not the only measure of, like, equality in sales. Like, like, who has access to the training? Who has access to feedback? Like, are we coaching the same way?
Huge.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Are we coaching the men the same way as we're coaching the women? Are we doing these things? Like, so I learned early in my sales career that, like, compensation is not the level playing field, right? Because like if we all have the same compensation,
but making the decisions on that compensation, right?
Yeah, or like, and even if we do have the same, right? Why are some of the dudes getting more training and more one-on-ones than the women are? Because I saw that too, and I was like, no, man, that doesn't work.
That
like,
doesn't.
Yeah.
That is one of the big, I'm glad you brought that up. The feedback loop for a lot of times there will be situations where a leader might be uncomfortable being alone one-on-one with a woman. I think especially after the Me Too movement, they saw a big pushback of fear, right? Of, oh, well, if I'm, one-on-one. And so like I've heard stories of, well, then my manager just left the door open so everybody could hear our conversation. So I could never have a private conversation. And so it's just like, some of these, you got to get over that. You got to give the same time, availability, feedback cycle. Because of it makes a difference in your career.
Yeah. The opposite doesn't, I mean, it happens, but not as, it shouldn't be a big deal. It shouldn't be a barrier. You know what I mean? Like I've never been, I don't know. I've had one-on-ones and I have, like right in one of my businesses, my partner's a woman, and like I don't know, we just
it can be a tricky thing. I would just say whatever you do the same thing with everyone.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's
right. Fair. If you're gonna leave the door open for one, do it for everybody.
Yeah, do it for everybody. Don't
skip, like go to lunch with all the guys and then not take. I've had that happen actually a number of times.
Oh,
so it is a limiter for sure.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's
good awareness.
Yeah. But and like, I don't know, there's so many more things that could go right if you just sit down than I don't know. I think
it like these conversations and just going, oh yeah, like what is the one thing I could do? I like that question of like, what's the one thing I could do that I can just start there?
Yeah.
And then once I figure that out, go to the next thing.
Yeah. And then we just,
there's an unlimited list. And I think that's where people get overwhelmed, right? Yeah. Is that, oh my gosh, once you start digging into this, there's so much. It can get overwhelming. And you just give up. So just pick one.
Right.
Pick one.
And I like to start, like when I have conversations with my men colleagues, I just go, dude, just don't take it personal. Like, okay, so for example, like I'm LDS. I grew up in Iowa where I was the only LDS person in my high school. And then when I was a senior, there were two of us and the other one was my sister. Right. You know what I mean? And so like we got some of that. And I was just like, how would you feel? Like, I just remember feeling like so singled out. Like, people in Utah will be like, I wasn't allowed to play with so-and-so because I was a Mormon. I had the opposite.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to play with my Catholic friends because I was Mormon. Right. Yeah. Like, and so you just, I don't know, you just start empathizing. But what I tell people is like, dude, it's not personal. Like when people attack, like when I hear those kind of sorts, I'm like, yeah, that must've been hard, man. Like, it's not personal. Like you got to like take away, like your identity isn't, you know what I mean?
Wish it is as simple as like, just love and accept all. Yeah, like, why is that so dang hard?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is. It's like love and accept all easy.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But it's not.
And like treat, and like, we had this game where, I mean, the golden rule is like treat others the way you would want to be treated. And I never liked that. And I don't know, I think I heard it once or maybe, I don't know, I can't remember, but I was like, treat others the way they need to be treated. Like they want to be treated. Like nobody wants to be treated like that.
Yeah.
Like
everybody's gonna, I think and it's just being open to understanding everybody's life experience.
And
being open to it and hearing it.
Well, and I learned really early in my career that like empathy isn't that, I don't know, like when other people feel seen and heard, like they make decisions. Everything moves quicker when people are
when they feel like they're heard and they belong and they have an impact and they're valued, like huge. I mean, that's leadership 101, right?
I was about to say, I'm sure you know Patrick Lencioni, right? He says like, you don't have to have consensus to move forward, but everybody needs to be heard. Like people, even when people are heard, like I think you mentioned this earlier in our conversation, like if you just speak up and maybe my idea is wrong, but like you let me talk.
Yeah, exactly. Right? And I was able to contribute.
Yeah.
And sometimes it'll be good and sometimes it won't.
And that's a different conversation. I mean, obviously there could be sexism in that, right? But all things being equal, that's a different conversation of like, hey, I spoke up and then my idea wasn't really working,
or
and whatever.
the person next to me said it was his. I've had that happen a number of times. It's like, did anybody not hear me? Like, I just said that, and then yeah.
That's frustrated. I would be frustrated.
That's a very real bias, very unconscious. And so until you're aware that happens and you're really listening in meetings, you don't realize it's happening. And then for me, that puts me in a hard spot, because then I got to speak up and defend myself, and puts me on the defensive side. And so I always really appreciated when I had allies in the room, the people that would say, hey, I think Trina said that, right? And call it out on my behalf, rather than putting on me to always sound defensive.
Right.
And so I think the more that we have individuals aware that could be happening, interrupting, oh my gosh, just like the amount of time I'll be speaking and just get interrupted. And recently I was at a meeting with like a VC kind of a company that I was going to partner with. And I started counting how many times I got interrupted, because I was like, this is nuts. Like, does he not even realize?
Wow.
Just complete unawareness.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to be like that. You don't want to be that person.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not, and it's just becoming aware fixes a lot of that.
It's so true, because I produce podcasts for other companies, and I'll be part of it is like, I'll be coaching them how to interview. And I remember we were doing this. We had this one guy, and he was a host. It was like his first time. I'd given him some pointers, and I remember recording it. And like, I'm not going to say anything right now, but I was like, hey, I want you to listen to this. And I played him 3 minutes, and he was just talking over. I'm like, dude, you got to shut up, man. Like, ask a question and then stop talking.
Yeah.
And he was like, oh, I didn't even know I did that. And I was like, that's bananas. How do you even talk in real life?
It's real though. I've seen it a lot.
Yeah.
I think everybody has been around that person that is always like not listening. It's not like they're not present. Right.
You're thinking of like the next thing to say, and you're like, I got to sound smart because, or what. I'm like, dude, just stop. Just
stop and listen. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Because it kind of goes back to that whole thing. Like, people just don't realize, like, in our brains, you might be trying to, like, you might be insecure trying to impress somebody, but all it sounds like is you're ignoring me. You're not listening to me. Like, and that's, you know what I mean? And yeah, it's just like that confidence thing, that new salesman versus a confident salesman, right? Is like,
it's part of emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And there's a power in the pause, is what I like to say. It's like taking a moment to hear somebody, hear what they're saying. And it's okay to have a pause, right? It's okay to go, okay, let me really think about what I want to say next, and slowing down a little bit.
You probably experience that in sales. I call it talking yourself out of a deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Dude, just
let them process.
Yeah. Let them make a decision, man. Cause they haven't even said no. And you're trying to like overcome every objection
before they even say it. Yeah. Don't put ideas in their head.
Right. Or like they might just say yes. Like, just let them answer. Like, and my sales training, because obviously listening is a big part. Obviously emotional intelligence is a big part. Empathy is a big part. But I was just like, dude, I'm like, you want to know the first rule of negotiation? Shut the hell up. That's the first rule.
I remember learning that when I did my master's degree. We took a negotiations class, and the first thing was let them always come in first, right? Like I always remember that, like, okay, tell me what you can do, and then we go from there, right? It's kind of like a little negotiation tactic, I guess.
Well, but it's just how it's like humans, right? Like, I don't know how to help you if you don't tell me anything, right? So like, it does sound weird, but I always flip it with people, because it's like, no, just ask them a question. Like, hey, it doesn't even have to be like, well, I'm not going to tell you the price because my negotiation, it's like, no, dude, let's not. How about you just?
I agree. Like when I'm,
and I know that's what you meant, but I was saying, like, some people twist my words, and I'm like, dude, stop it.
Yeah. I think having a direct conversation there leads to higher success in any of the sales and I sell every day. I sell tech moms every single day.
Mhm.
Right? Being a nonprofit, you're always out there fundraising and putting it out there. And when we first started this, my co-founder was like, how are you doing, like, getting everybody to get on board? And I'm like, I'm just very direct. Why tiptoe around it? Like, I need this amount of money. Can you help me? And do you know somebody else if you can't? Like, just
Yeah.
help me figure this out. Like, we got places to go. Let's go. Let's go get this done. And it's been amazing.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's so good.
What is the biggest objection you get selling tech moms?
I don't have many.
Okay.
I did have one. It's kind of interesting. The negative ones are the ones that stick in your head, right? I've actually had two. I'll talk the two negative ones, but that doesn't supersede like the hundreds of tech companies we're working with. Our legislators, everybody else here in Utah has been amazing community to fundraise with and to get this work done together, like huge partnerships across the board. So I don't want to negate any of that by talking the negative, but I'll share kind of a couple that, I get. The first is when I first started fundraising and I was pulling money together to launch this, I started to connect with individuals that I thought would be, help me get off the ground. One of them, I had been mentoring a friend of theirs that was a college student. He had replied to me and said, "Hey, thanks for supporting her and mentoring her. We really appreciate it." So I reached out and he wrote back. He's like, "Sorry, Trina, I can't help you with tech moms. I believe in family values."
What the hell? Oh my God. That's crazy.
Yeah, there's that pause there because I'm like, okay, don't freak out, right?
Yeah.
Like, don't lose your shiz. So that one's like, and I've had kind of that same response where the feeling is that I've even had this from other organizations where they've said, well, we can't put women to work. They need to be at home. That's such a huge, and I think there's this underlying feeling, that's that stereotype, right, of where a woman belongs and then she's supposed to be at home, and that destroys families by having her work. I'm like, that is so wrong. So wrong on so many levels. And you just look at the social and economic impact our women are making. I mean, they're making 23% higher pay within a few months. That goes back to their families. It goes back to our economies. It goes back to raising and providing better lives for so many people. Like, it's exponential. And so to say it goes against family values, that one I struggled with. The second one I get asked a lot is, why don't you run tech dads?
Oh, jeez. That's crazy.
So I have had that multiple times, not just once. And
I hate that argument on any playing field.
It's like, okay, let's talk about the barriers that are there for mainly women. And we allow men in our program. We've had men go through the program. It's not that we're excluding men. It's just that the barriers that we focus on are primarily targeted toward women. So, childcare usually falls on the woman to handle that, and financial needs and network. You don't have the network, right? To be able to get into some of those kind of key things. But I went home and told my husband about that. He's like, you shouldn't tell anybody this, but I'm going to. But I went home and I'm like, Cal, I keep getting asked, like, you need to be launching tech dads. And he goes, well, we don't need that. It already exists. It's called BYU. Oh, so yeah, so I might get in trouble. All the BYU fans out there, sorry. But I mean,
I was just going to say college in general.
Yeah, college in general, right? It's just everywhere.
Yeah.
So just every program that's in the world basically is predominantly men that have dominated the IT space. There's a lot of reasons for that, but we don't need to put more into that. We need to start looking at the underserved groups.
Yeah.
And focus there.
Yeah. Well, again, it's just that abundance mindset. Like, what are you talking about, man? And the one thing I always argue that my rebuttal to that, because I just like being a little sarcastic, but I was just like, it's America. Yeah. Like, if I want to take 23 grand and flush it down the toilet, like, yeah, let's do it. I'm allowed to, right? And that's an exaggeration, and I'm not saying that that's not a correlation at all, but I'm just saying, like, how did we get to the point where, like, we can't do whatever we want? Like, in America,
or it's us versus them. That really bothers me. It's like, well, we're already doing a lot of this from a higher education. It's just that feeling of belonging. And going in, like I know what that is, going in all my classes, being the only girl and your professor's telling blonde jokes. And I had, some pretty hard things happen. Like I had students in front of me watching porn in class, holding up a little folder thinking I'm not going to see. And you're just dealing with stuff all the time, and so just step back and go, you know what? Others are going to have a very different experience than I have had. And just because I don't have it doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and the net outcome for more workers in the workforce and more ideas being shared is always a net positive, no matter what.
We have such a huge resource of highly educated women ready to go to work.
Yeah.
And we just are providing pathways as fast as we can.
Yeah.
And trying to keep up because they are waiting for us to come help. Yeah. And that's what I feel it. I saw it. Like, it was kind of interesting as I launched the organization. I was like, is anybody going to show up? Like, I have this idea and this feeling like this needs to happen, but I'm like, I don't know if anybody's going to apply, but it's just, the pipeline is large, thousands, right? And we're trying to get as many in the program as we can, as fast as we can.
Yeah. And just provide opportunities for people that don't have it. Like, I think you made a really good point that people just feel like personally attacked. Yeah. And you got to I don't know, that for me, it's not about, I don't know. For me, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just like, we need to just, I don't care if I'm right or I'm wrong. We just need to make the right decision.
Be open to feedback, just like you would, everybody needs that feedback. I do things wrong all the time. I do things that are sexist and I catch myself and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just did that. Right. Yeah. And I was at a dinner for my husband's company was being recognized. And so we went to this dinner and the company had been growing really fast. And I walked up to the table and there was, a man and a woman sitting at the table. And I'm like, oh, is this your wife? Not realizing she's an employee of the company. Oh. And I hate it when people do that to me, ignore me and assume just I'm the wife.
Yeah, you're just,
I've done that going to speak and had people ignore me and shake my husband's hand. And then I go on stage and keynote, it's just, it just happens. But we all have to go, oh, okay. Don't do that again, right?
Right.
Start to be kind of more aware that way. So it's just making it all okay.
I know when I was in sales, I had a few of those ouch moments too, where I was like, the wife would come in and then I'd look at the husband and be like, oh, I made a huge mistake.
Yeah.
I made a big mistake.
It's just being aware of it though, right? Because sometimes if you're not aware and you just keep doing it, you just want to know.
Well, I think you're doing amazing stuff. What was one of the bigger, some of the objections, but was there any, I guess I kind of want to know just from a business standpoint, running a nonprofit is not easy. Getting a nonprofit status is really hard by itself.
Yeah.
What were some of the big challenges, business wise getting started? Fundraising was probably one, but any ones that people wouldn't really notice or wouldn't expect?
We had a really choppy start, actually. We founded our organization under my consulting agency. So Rise Next is where I do all my training and corporate consulting. Mm-hmm. And so we had launched there in partnership with another nonprofit called Mother Coders. And at the time we did that, we were running it. We wanted to bring it to Utah. And the CEO stepped down, just disappeared on us. And I was like, okay, we're going to still launch this. So our pilot program started under this Mother Coders organization, but then quickly found out we're going to just keep going and do it on our own. And so we decided to create a nonprofit, knowing that was going to be how we need to scale. So it was a little bit choppy start. We got it done, right? And we have had the most amazing outcomes. That pilot group is just, we have women that became full stack developers in less than a year and started their own web dev shops. And so we have, it's just incredible. Starting tech companies. They're going into data and analytics and software development. Just the impact that I'm seeing is so incredible.
Yeah.
Like I wish everybody could see and get the messages we get every week. It's just so fulfilling. I get paid not in a cash amount right now through that, but through, these life transformations that happen. So that was choppy. And then, COVID was really, really rough. Robin and Mikkel and I sat down one night and we're like, do we keep doing this? What's this COVID thing? Like, I don't know what we're going to do. We ended up launching. We had to like wear face masks and, social distancing and temperature checks as they came in the door. And, our trainer was like high risk. And so she's wearing like 3 masks. Like it was just, and we did it. Like the fact that we did that was a miracle. And you look at, what happened after that. We saw the female recession and women leaving the workforce, but they were coming back into like they're transitioning into these technical roles. So the timing of it was ideal for what we were doing. And it's kind of been the silver lining of COVID for us is the awareness of remote working and opportunities there for some life work harmony.
Wow.
Yeah. That's
incredible. I like asking this question. What surprised you most launching Tech Moms or Rise Next, or like, was there anything where you're like really surprised?
I get surprised just how amazing our community is. Yeah. Like the amount of support and funding and ongoing engagement and people wanting to be involved and volunteering, and just it's made our process and the impact so much greater than what we could have done on our own. And I think we knew this was great. We knew it was needed, but just hearing the stories, if anybody wants to just have like a motivational Saturday, I'll tell you when our graduations are, just come listen to these women's lives and how they've transformed in 2 months. It is so empowering. Yeah. And it's just that to me surprised me.
So you're getting tech degrees in like 2 months? That's how long?
It's not a tech degree. It's a certificate to Tech Moms. They actually do HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript introduction. Enough to go, I've got the confidence to say, I know what this coding thing is. This is what I want to do. It really helps them commit. But then we bring in presenters in cybersecurity, UI, UX, technical sales, digital marketing, quality assurance, project management, right? Like all these other roles, really because we just demystify the tech industry because nobody even knows that these roles exist.
Right.
How are they going to come in? Like they don't even know.
And when you look at some of those job descriptions, they make it sound so crazy, but you're like
no, this is what it really is.
Actually, this is
this is it, and you can do it.
And people get mad at me when I see like sometimes I'll troll like account executive job descriptions. Yeah, I'm like, stop it. Yeah, you're making cold calls. Yeah, you're closing deals.
I had that conversation this week. Yeah,
I'm like, stop telling everybody that this is like some crazy job. Like it's a hard job, but you can do it. We can teach people how to do this. It's not. I think what's really cool about that, to kind of cap this whole conversation off, is one of the things I'm also really passionate about, which is what I love about this conversation, is like disrupting education. Yeah. Because like, I think another barrier for women is like, you got to have this 4-year degree. And if you're already like my mom went to college when she had 5 kids. Like I remember being a senior and my mom and I were going to school, but she had to drive 2 hours because of whatever. Wow. And I was like, that can be a barrier for women. And so just like you can get 2 months.
Time is huge. So we partner with all our higher education. So we work with Weber State, Salt Lake Community College, UVU, and Mountain Land Tech currently is where we're actually running our courses.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
And part of what's great about that is it gives us like that next step for them. And we work with the universities in order to transition them into roles or into classes. And as we've worked with the various schools, certificate programs for, hey, I just want to do web development. I can get that done in a year. Yeah, let's go. And I think that the higher education system is looking at that and recognizing they have to alter some of the, especially as adult non-traditional learners, they don't have 4 years. I need a job now, right? Like I've got 6 months to figure this out. Like we got to go.
In education in general, nobody has 4 years. Yeah. Like, I served an LDS mission, got off my mission, and I was like, I don't have 4 years to wait to make money.
Yeah,
Like, this is crazy.
I got to get going.
Like,
yeah.
So I was actually part of like, I don't know, this was like 6 years ago or whatever, when like online school was kind of there, but like you couldn't get your whole degree online.
Yeah.
Until I was about like 2 years in. And then I just went fully online, and I was like, this is how people should go to college.
Yeah. Well, that's how I did, because I worked full time, and then I went to University of Phoenix. That was the only school that did online after hours adult back then.
I remember.
So yeah, fortunately, everybody's kind of adopted that.
And why? So, and good for them, because like that's crazy. Like, who has time to go sit down for?
Just trying to find parking. Like, that's like, who has time to go circle the parking lots for 2 hours in order to go to class?
That's wild. But I love that, because education, and there's a lot of, I have a lot of conversations where like, there's a lot of traditional education, advocates who are like, no, you need this. And I'm like, no, you don't need that, man. You just need, like, we need to know enough.
What you really need to know.
Exactly.
That is a lot of what we do. We have a full-time placement coordinator. We do resume review and interview prepping. But one of the biggest things is learning how to decipher a job description. Right. Because there's a lot of opting out when they don't need to. And they're qualified. And so we have a lot of those conversations.
And do you ever like you warn them? Because when you got some of those keywords in a job description that you should say, like, we need a plug and play. Yeah. That means you don't have any training, Doc. And that means, I don't know if I want to be part of that.
Yeah. You're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. Be careful. And I think that is another kind of warning I'd put out there for any company that has control of like their perception. As we're growing this community, they're talking, right? And they're saying which companies are supportive of diversity, which ones are, going to accept me as I am, and which ones are not. And there are conversations happening. I don't think companies realize just to the extent that they're losing people, highly qualified people, because their culture may not be the best.
Yeah.
And training your leadership teams. And that's why I continue to do a lot of the work I do at Rise Next and doing leadership training and culture, is because I'm trying to create the companies that will accept all of these pipelines of people we're pulling in, right? And it's not just hiring them, but retaining. So just something to think about.
Yeah. Because I don't know, I never got on board with, I think culture is like, the way how I heard it was what you celebrate and what you tolerate. And like, that's pretty much it. And if you can spot right away that like, this is what you tolerate this, or you celebrate this, like, we can figure it out real quick. You know what I mean? It's not Dwight Schrute quotes on the wall. Like, those go away really fast. But this has been a really awesome conversation. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
When's your book come out?
May. We're getting close. I'm hoping by end of May. Yep.
Well, there you go. We'll have, whenever it goes out, we'll put it in the show notes, but tell everybody how they can follow you, how they can get them on Tech Moms, all that good stuff.
So Tech Moms is tech-moms.org. Tell your friends, neighbors, family. We're always looking for new applications. And like I said, we're across the Wasatch Front. We also run an online program, so nationally. So let people know if there's any companies out there that want to get involved, reach out to us as well. We love our community partners and our corporate partners. If you're looking for leadership training or culture consulting in some of those areas, that's risenext.com, rizenext.com. And then as I'm launching and speaking and doing my book, that's trinaceleste.com. So you got 3 to pick from. Choose which one.
There you go. And they can follow you on LinkedIn too.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Trina. I appreciate it.